Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association webinar this evening. We have a lot of things we want to cover. First of all, we want to make sure that everyone is safe. Hopefully we'll have no electrical problems. So I'd like to start with Bob Anderson, who is our director and our producer, who will explain the process and allow the attendees to ask questions and explain how that is done. Bob?
Thanks, Richard. Welcome everybody to our second virtual SOHA community meeting. Tonight, just to let you know, you are watching a group of people who are going to be speaking, and you're just watching and listening. You don't have to worry. No one can see you or hear you, so you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the webinar. But we do encourage you to ask questions. You can submit a question anytime you want. The earlier you do it, the better. You have to find the little Q&A icon somewhere on your screen. Sometimes it's on the bottom, sometimes it's on the top. It varies. Sometimes you have to wave your mouse or finger around near it. But once you find it, you click it, you type your question in, you push the return key, and it goes to Matt Epstein. And Matt's going to manage the questions for tonight, and he'll be popping in and out with questions and give us a little more information how it'll be done before Chief Moore speaks also. So the instructions are pretty simple. We hope you enjoy the meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. I'd like to first introduce the members of the Board of Directors and ask them to introduce themselves, actually. We'll start out by Matt. Unmute yourself, Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Epstein. I'm Vice President of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. That's who I am.
Okay. Next is Jules. Jules, can you unmute yourself? Okay, while you find out how to do that, we'll go on to Tom.
Okay, no, I got it. I'm here.
You got it, okay.
Okay, I'm Jules Spear, Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association.
And Jules, what do you do for the association?
Well, I procure restaurants for SOHA meetings for the last 20 plus years. Generally speaking, I'm kind of a troublemaker for the community.
I don't think so. I think you've been named the honorary mayor of Sherman Oaks by the Los Angeles City Council.
Correct.
So with that, next is Tom.
Yes, hi, I'm Tom Glick, board member.
Okay, what is your background? Do you have any expertise that are helpful to the community? We can't hear you. But
by accident. Okay, I've been a planner for the city of Los Angeles for 33 years, so I like to hope I help the board out with land use and issues related to land use and planning, long and short range.
okay,
City's going through, we're going through a community plan update now.
Okay, you're retired as a planner for the city.
I am retired, yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, John.
Hi, I'm John Eisen. I'm the treasurer of the association. I like to give a shout out to Bob Anderson, who has made all of this possible to be able to meet here virtually.
Maria, please introduce yourself.
I'm Maria Pavlou-Calvin, and I chair the legislative committee for the organization.
Okay. Nancy.
Hi, Sherman Oaks. I'm Nancy Segoyan. I am a board member and I am the membership chair. And I would just like to speak for a moment about the importance of becoming a SOHA member. We welcome our members and we welcome our guests, and you are all obviously here because you value what happens in our community. And so SOHA is a nonprofit. We are 100% member supported. We advocate on behalf of the community on major issues such as mass transit, housing, safety, and so many other things impacting our community. And we work diligently toward the best outcomes for our community. So we ask you to join SOHA and help us continue our good work on your behalf. And you can do that very easily by going to ShermanOaks914.com. You can sign up online. If you have any questions, just click contact us. I will get the message and happy to help you. But we can't do it without your support. So we thank you for joining us, and we ask you to spread the word and help us in our work on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jay?
Yes, I'm Jay Weitzler. I am Secretary of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. And as such, I not only have to learn how to type, but I work with Maria and Tom and Bob and Jules on the housing subcommittee. And I think Maria is probably going to tell you a little bit about what's happening in housing in a few minutes. I have to say, though, that she does an amazing job. And we've been met with nothing but opposition from our state leaders in trying to save our single family neighborhood. And Maria, I'm sure, will outline it for you as soon as she gets an opportunity. I am also the liaison between the Buckley School and the organization. And I work pretty closely with the CEO, CFO of the organization, or COO, Lisa Turchan. And Lisa did want me to tell everybody that the school is opening next week, and students will be on campus, or will be off campus, excuse me, they'll be off campus. And after the first month, they'll reevaluate it and see whether or not it is safe and secure in light of COVID-19 to return the students to campus. But thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce our first guest. He is a new senior lead officer for Sherman Oaks, Officer James Charlotte. If you could give us a little of your background and what a senior lead officer does and how people can contact you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Officer Jim Charette. A little bit about me. I joined the department a little over 22 years ago. After the academy, I did my rookie year in Hollywood Division. And from there, I wheeled out to the Valley to Van Nuys Division. And the first couple of years, I worked patrol at various watches of patrol here in Van Nuys. And then after those couple of years, I joined the gang unit here and worked that for a few years. And then from there, I promoted to a field training officer and here in Van Nuys, and worked training new officers, rookie officers coming out to the field for several years. And then while I was on that assignment, I also did some loans to narcotics and also to work detectives. From there, I moved to North Hollywood for a change of venue after several years in Van Nuys. And after doing field training officer work in North Hollywood, I transferred to the Animal Cruelty Task Force, which was a citywide investigative unit that investigated all types of animal cruelty and animal fighting, blood sports. After 5 years of doing that challenging assignment, I was looking for a new challenge and came back to Van Nuys in July 2014 to be a undercover vice investigator. I worked at here and did a lot of work on Sepulveda Boulevard and timed out in that unit. It's a limited tour assignment after 2.5 years. And I then joined on loan the Human Trafficking Task Force here in the Valley. I did that for a little over a year. And then I came back to Van Nuys Patrol to again be a field training officer, and been doing that for the past couple years. And recently, I'm aspiring to be a senior lead officer. And just this deployment a couple weeks ago, I took a loan to the senior lead office. That's me in a nutshell. What the senior lead does is each patrol division is divided into basic car areas sections. And for instance, for Van Nuys, there's 7 different basic car areas. Each of those basic car areas has a officer dedicated to those sections, which is the senior lead officer, and they're in charge of that basic car area. Senior lead officer is a link to the community, to link the community with the department. Senior lead officer keeps tabs on crime trends in their area and working with patrol and working with detectives to solve crimes and help prevent crimes.
What is your geographic area?
Oh, sorry. So I'm working the northern half of Sherman Oaks, which is here in the pink. It's basically Chandler and Magnolia on the north side, and the freeway and Van Nuys Boulevard on the south side, and out to Coldwater roughly, and to the 405 freeway. And then Officer Saldana, who covers the other section of Sherman Oaks, he's actually on vacation and will be back September 1st, but he covers all this area in green.
And how do people reach you?
So I can be reached. I have a cell phone number for the senior lead officer, whoever's in this position. The number will always be the same for that basic car area, and it's 818-731-2563. Once again, that's 818-731-2563. And you can also reach me by email. My email address is 34626@lapd.online, ONLINE. Once again, that was 34626@lapd.online.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Having you attend upcoming meetings, hopefully in the near future in person. But in the interim, it'll be on Zoom. Thank you.
Hey, Jim, you didn't say who one of your first training officers were.
Oh, Officer Nate Bannery in Hollywood. We worked the Hollywood Boulevard footbeat together. He gave me some really good training. That was back in '98.
Great. Okay, next, Andy Solomon. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Thank you, Richard. Hi,
Okay.
everyone.
And why don't you self-introduce and what's happening in Sherman Oaks from your point of view?
Absolutely. Everyone, I am from the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. I am your neighborhood prosecutor. I am a prosecutor who is assigned the Van Nuys and Sherman Oaks area. I deal with all the chronic issues and the really weird, wacky stuff. So I work with very closely with the senior lead officers. I've worked with Officer Charette and Officer Saldana. Before Officer Charette, Officer Barry, you all know him. We work on chronic issues that need a little bit more attention, a little bit more problem solving. Right now, what's a hot ticket item, actually Officer Charette and Officer Saldana have been meeting with me about this issue, and Brad as well, who from Council District 4, is party houses. We're having a lot of party houses during the coronavirus time. I've been putting together a plan. We're doing some additional training in Van Nuys to figure out how I want my filings done from LAPD sent to me, the kind of investigations I'm looking to file cases for houses that are becoming a nuisance for the community. So that is a hot button issue right now for the last 2.5 weeks. And I foresee that it will continue until we begin enforcement. So that's the current issue. If you'd like to brief me, real briefly.
I don't know who spoke. Okay, let's go on to Brad. Brad, if you can unmute. Brad is in charge of Sherman Oaks for our Councilman, David Rue. Can you introduce yourself and anything we should know that's real important?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, as Richard said, I am Brad Fingard, Field Deputy for Councilmember David Rue. I'm the main liaison between Councilmember Rue's office and the Sherman Oaks community. So any constituent services, homelessness related, traffic related, FAA related, you can contact me. I get to work very closely with Andy and Officer Charette and the team over there. One thing I did want to highlight is a new program that's launching called the Los Angeles ADU Accelerator Program. It's going to be a partnership with homeowners to rent existing ADUs to older adults facing housing insecurity. This is a population that, according to the last homeless count numbers, increased by 20%, so a very vulnerable community. And basically, homeowners will receive benefits such as qualified tenant rentals, landlord support. The goal is to help kind of pilot a program for senior stabilization to reduce the number of seniors who are falling into homelessness. That will be launching, the application for that will be launching next Monday. Applications will be accepted on a rolling basis, and there will be a webinar on Tuesday, September 1st for interested homeowners and community members. And I'll make sure Richard and the folks on the board have that information to share with you all. And I'll make sure to include it in my updates this week as well. If you need to reach me for any of those issues or anything else, you can call me at 213-675-4590. Again, 213-675-4590. That's my work cell phone. And then you can also email me at brad.fingard@lacity.org, Brad, BRAD.Fingard, FINGARD @lacity.org. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we have two reports before we get to Chief Moore. First, Maria Calvan, if you can give us an update on legislation that potentially will eliminate single-family neighborhoods throughout the state, but in more concern to us in Sherman Oaks.
Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everybody. All of you know that my committee and I have been working hard fighting against 4 legislative bills that, if passed, will end single-family neighborhoods. We have advocated for more housing on commercial corridors in hopes of sparing single-family neighborhoods from apartment development. We have faced, however, major headwinds from a legislature that is in lockstep in support of these bills. And we have also faced a well-funded, very active lobbying group called NIMBYs that insists that our neighborhoods should not be allowed to remain single-family homes. We have organized all kinds of homeowners groups all over the state, and in particular, all of the San Fernando Valley, Santa Monica, South LA, East LA, Bel Air. We have organized wealthy, middle-class, and vulnerable communities, all fighting to save their neighborhoods. We sent out last week a statewide email blast that resulted in more than 1,000 emails to legislatures all around the state. But this is not enough. Senator Hertzberg is not fighting actively to stop these bills. Assemblymember Nazarian is in support of single-family neighborhoods, but like Senator Hertzberg, is under great pressure to pass these bills. So we are sending another email blast Friday with details on the bills and asking all of you to once again send your emails to Senator Hertzberg and Assemblymember Nazarian in order to stop these bills that will be voted on next week. One piece of news that I received about 2 hours ago is that the governor is unhappy with some of these housing bills. And this is the first time we have actually seen a crack in the support for these bills in the legislature. So this is a great time for all of us to reach out so we get better housing results that don't necessarily mean our neighborhoods are destroyed. Thank you.
Okay, Maria, one question. Can you please repeat, our state senator is Robert Hertzberg and our assembly person is Adrien Nazarian.
Correct.
What is their position on these bills that would allow apartments to be built in single-family neighborhoods? What is their position?
Well, Senator Hertzberg is not going to fight to oppose these bills, but he is conflicted. I think that basically he doesn't love these bills, but he's not going to fight against them. Assemblymember Nazarian is very supportive of single family. We feel he is somebody that will fight for us, but he has not taken a position yet as well.
Thank you very much. Next, Bob Anderson on trains going over Sherman Oaks.
Hi, Richard. Hi, everybody. I wanted to give you some critical information about the Sepulveda Transit Corridor project. It's a major time frame for that. Next week on Wednesday, the 26th, industry submits innovative concept proposals to Metro. This is really important. It's a way we may get concepts for that project that can be built quicker and can be built cheaper. We think right now that there are 4 industry organizations that are going to bid. One of those is a monorail along the 405 freeway. We've told you about that one. There are 3 others. We don't know anything about those. Unfortunately, Metro has told us that they don't plan to tell the public anything about these concepts until Metro actually decides which ones they like and which ones they don't. So we're going to be kept in the dark like mushrooms and then told, here's what you're going to like, too bad. So we didn't like that very much, since we might not learn anything about that till 2021. We also can't make comments on the concepts because we don't know what they are, and it's just unfair. So Tuesday, I sent a very strong letter to Metro telling them that it's just unacceptable and giving them a possible solution to look at. I did hear today from Mayor Garcetti's transportation director, Doug Mensman. And Mayor Garcetti, by the way, is the chair of the Metro Board of Directors. And Doug said the letter has been sent to all Board of Director members. So maybe we'll get some action. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We're going to ask you for help. Tomorrow morning, you'll get an email blast. We've done a few of these lately. There's so much going on. We're going to ask you to send an email to 3 people in Metro, one on the board, Mayor Garcetti, and the CEO of Metro, and tell them this is not acceptable. And that's good. One more thing quickly. A couple of people have contacted me because they read in their email that Metro approved some sort of contract for this project already. That's the contract to do the environmental analysis. It was given to an outside firm. We've looked at it. The features look okay. It's not going to interfere with anything we're trying to do. In fact, it actually has some provisions to help. So don't worry about that. And please, if you have time to send the emails tomorrow, please do it. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, just to make sure that people understand, one of the proposals that probably, and maybe the least expensive for Metro, would put a train over Sepulveda Boulevard that would eliminate the office buildings on Ventura and Sepulveda. And the train would go all the way almost to Valley Vista above ground. Am I correct?
You're correct. It would also take out all the apartments and small businesses next to the freeway on Sepulveda Boulevard near Whole Foods.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Chief Moore, Michael Moore. He's been with the police department for 39 years. And he spent a lot of time in the San Fernando Valley. He has been to our meetings for many years. He attends our toy drive virtually every year. He knows the issues and the problems of the San Fernando Valley and has always been very responsive to the needs of the community. He has been chief for the last 2 years. As we all know, there's been tough situations here in Los Angeles over the last month or 2. So we'd like to hear from him as to his perspective and what he sees lies ahead. With that, I'd like to introduce LAPD Chief Michael Moore.
So thank you, sir. And Richard, it's always good to see you, as well as other members of the group. And Jules, you are the mayor, in my mind, of Sherman Oaks, not just the honorary one, but Matt and others around the table. This is it's always great to be back with this group. I've not met James James, but you have a wonderful group here with us as the acting senior lead. The Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association are individuals that are well vested in their community. They take not just community safety, but the health and welfare of all of the residents and communities that make up the Sherman Oaks area very seriously. Dedicated people that I wish we had more of in other parts of the city. This is you're a proud example of what people who take interest in the stake in the ground that they have of their communities, of how it materially and clearly impacts public safety and makes our work as policing so much easier and so much better and rewarding. So today I appreciate this opportunity. Zoom is who would ever imagine a year ago that we would be in a state as we are today, not just here in the San Fernando Valley, but across this city, in this country, in this world. The Dodgers a year ago were having the best record in baseball. We're headed towards another World Series, and we were riding high with a great economy. And this association was dealing with some of the issues you're dealing with today: zoning, and how do we deal with issues of homelessness, and how do we gain acceptable levels of housing so that we don't deal with we could effectively deal with the greatest humanitarian crisis of our generation, which is homelessness. And we ended the year, and just my first full inaugural year, calendar year as chief, with the lowest number of, one of the safest levels of crime in more than 50 years. 254 homicides, which was the 10th year in a row of fewer than 300 homicides. Crime reduction in both violent and property. That we saw diversity, our efforts to deepen our representation of women as well as African American and Asian Pacific Islanders as recruits and members of this organization taking hold and gaining momentum. And we saw our work in reducing uses of force, and particularly deadly force, as we make our efforts to show the public that while there's the rarity in which we have to resort to deadly force, that there was further efforts that could be made to build trust in all of our communities that we would use deadly force as a last resort. We ended last year with 26 officer-involved shootings, which was more than nearly a 50% reduction from 5 years earlier, and more than a 30-year low. So we really exited 2019 as a year of success, but also it was one that we lost 2 of our own. So we mourn the loss of 2 of our officers that died in the line of duty, but we look forward to a brighter 2020. And none of us saw the pandemic coming, and it began in the small waves of China and then grew across Asia, Europe, and landed on our shores. And as we came into March, we began to see the reality is that pandemic would not ignore us and would have a catastrophic impact on us, not just in the threat to public health and safety, but also to the pandemic that it would do to our budget. The department leaned into that. We supported many functions, and we still continue to support functions relative to the pandemic that have little or nothing to do with policing, but have everything to do with providing for the safety of Angelenos in an effort to reduce the impact of this deadly virus. We weren't immune to that virus. We've lost 2 of our own personnel in the line of duty to this virus. We've had more than 500 of our personnel that have been impacted by this, and I'm thankful that over 400 of them have survived and are back to work. But the threats continue in regards to the safety of our personnel. On that point, I just want to remark that I've heard a number of comments tonight regarding face coverings and our personnel using a face covering. It is a requirement within the Los Angeles Police Department, and my expectation that all personnel wear face coverings in public, and as well as in their workplace when they are not socially distanced significantly away from others. And I've seen an increase in compliance, but I recognize there are still failures. And there still are some of our people who have not found it to be a practice or a habit. And what we have done in regards to that is we'll continue to insist and implore our people to wear this. I know that the consequence of the impact this has had on our employees' health as well as the health of their families has encouraged many of them to wear masks and to insist that their partners and others wear masks. But to the concern that I hear tonight, and as I move around the city, that they see instances in which people are not wearing masks, I also assure you that we have, within the last month, increased the consequences of that. It's no longer an education campaign. It's no longer an encouragement. We're now taking corrective action for those that have failed. This is not just for their own safety. This is frankly for the safety of people that they work with and people they come in contact with. So we as a department have suffered as a result of this, and our men and women are going out and risking themselves each day as they interact with the public that is also carriers of this terrible virus that has such an unpredictable result on people's welfare. We've also, as we've seen this pandemic, saw that the economic impact would be tremendous and devastating. And the May budget revision, or the May budget proposal that came from the mayor, saw reductions in the size of our workforce because of a significant reduction in revenue. And we looked at those reductions clear-eyed and began formulating plans of how we would deal with it. We're going to lose about 100 officers at that point. Then, on the tragic day of May 25th, we saw the murder of George Floyd. And the days after that, despite remarks of how disgusting and how that action of those officers did not represent law enforcement across this country or law enforcement in Los Angeles, the protests and the demonstrations in outrage regarding his death, and it then being extended into policing and the growth of that, expansion of that to its expression against policing and the failures of policing over our generations, continued and amplified, where we saw it devolve into civil unrest and acts of violence, of arson, of looting, and widespread across the country in every major city and in many smaller cities of America as well. Here in Los Angeles, we had initially on this event involving George Floyd's death occurred on a Monday. On Wednesday, a small demonstration turned into a freeway incursion. Thursday, we saw demonstrations at night that had 2 vehicle fires, but on Friday night, it accelerated and much like a firestorm, the downtown area saw levels of violence against police officers that I have not seen in nearly 30 years with the civil unrest of 1992. I was on the streets. I took a brick myself, if you will, and we saw officers that stood and attempted to defend downtown business core against acts of looting and vandalism and arson, while taking bricks and rocks and pipes and all types of attacks. We also made every effort to make arrests and to stop the violence by impacting those that were committing it, while at the same time recognizing there were others that were not committing violence but were there simply as demonstrators. Unfortunately, on Saturday is a new day, and I hope to see that was a spasm that would not repeat. But of course, we saw that not just the downtown had a smaller degree of the same demonstration that devolved, but we saw Saturday night in the western, in the mid-city area, significantly expand, and the Melrose corridor was just devastated. On Sunday and Monday, with curfews in effect and mobilization and activation of the activation of the National Guard, however, we saw Los Angeles return to levels of protests and activities that have continued to this day and being generally lawful, and most recently in the last month and a half that have not involved the looting, the fires, and the violence against officers. We did have an exception of that on the 25th of July, which was an anniversary, if you will, a 60-day anniversary of George Floyd's death, involving attacks against police officers, as well as acts of vandalism in the downtown area. That was largely sympathetic to the acts of what was occurring in Portland. But the other matter that we saw during this period of time was an effort of a growth of an effort called defunding the police. And that is a matter of a belief that the funding rates and the focus of public government in supporting law enforcement was coming in disadvantaging communities of color, particularly the African-American community, and was underserving those communities with important needed social services, programming such as housing, jobs, mental health services, public health services. And I disagree with that, and I disagreed with it during the course of the last 3 months. I do believe that as a country, as a democracy, that the law enforcement through its history has made mistakes and has been used by government improperly at times, and has had an adverse impact, an inequitable impact on communities, certain communities of color. But I don't believe that defunding the police at this juncture in our existence is the means of fixing that. The means of fixing the inequities in our country is to look at the underlying causes of those inequities, whether it be housing, healthcare, the jobs, the mental health services, just as we look at what ails us when the imperfect or the disproportionate impact of this pandemic on those same communities. We need to look at these other programs and so forth. No one's suggesting that we cut medical services because of the pandemic. And yet in this issue where policing is called to address symptoms, there's been a call to defund and many, in some instances, eliminate or abolish policing. So in the last, at the budget hearings in June, the amplification of these efforts established a $150 million reduction in our budget for this fiscal year that we're now in, which involved a reduction of more than 250 personnel of sworn ranks and 150 civilian ranks. So between now and May to June of next year, the Los Angeles Police Department will shrink nearly 500 positions from where we were a year ago. These are 500 people that were working and doing jobs in the Los Angeles Police Department. And at the same time, there is a call to arms that we will, as an organization, shed or move and realign responsibilities to other entities, other organizations that police officers are not best suited or necessarily needed in order to do the work. And I fully support that, as do the men and women of LAPD. The men and women of LAPD have been asked to do too much for too long. Every societal ill, every societal shortcoming. I was asked tonight about porta potties that are not being supported, that are not being cleaned, and what's the Los Angeles Police Department going to do about that? And too often and too many times, we've been asked and we have answered by setting up resources that will go and clean those porta potties. And we need to stop that. And so I am fully supportive of establishing alternatives for important matters of that the public wants a public service done, but it's asking that law enforcement not be its agent. What that will require, of course, is that these other disciplines will need to expand their work and be available 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, the way the police and fire department are. The key here is that the cuts have been made to the Los Angeles Police Department. This is not envisioning that we're going to build a resource while the department maintains its staffing and then in an orderly manner transition those obligations to those new personnel. No, the cuts here are coming now. We have not hired an academy class in June or July. I'm sorry, in July or August. And we will have our first academy class for this fiscal year in September. And this will cause us to incrementally start reducing the size of our workforce. And so it is critical that over the next few months that we identify what functions the Los Angeles Police Department will stop doing. And then the key here will be for the city and others to identify who's going to pick up that work, or is that work that will no longer be done or no longer be done by a person. So the department right now is working through its book of 1 million calls for service a year and identifying tens of thousands of calls that we look forward to Department of Mental Health, Public Health, LASA, other DOT, and others to pick up for the place that we will transfer those calls to so that they will respond and conduct the necessary work that's at the request of the public and meet the public's expectations. That will free the department to its core primary mission and allow us also to do the community engagement, to work with our neighbors, to know who our communities are, and to have good communications and understand and help coordinate and task those other agencies to the responsibilities that they're obligated and should be doing. One of the challenges that James has, I'm sure he'll tell you, is that many times we're asked to do things that are not on our equipment belt. We've got a lot of things that we carry on our belts and in our cars, but there's a lot of tools that are beyond our responsibilities even today with what the broad range of things that we're asked to do. And so we are always going to be a point of coordination. We'll always be, much as our neighborhood prosecutor on the phone here today is a point of coordination and a problem solver and can relieve those problems. But we have to get out of the habit. And the staffing cuts that the Los Angeles Police Department is in being saddled with requires us. This is no longer an idea that, well, it'd be nice if we ever get there. The cuts have now been made. We will fall back by the end of this fiscal year to a staffing level on our sworn side that we have not seen since 2007. Our call load has gone up 63% since 2007. I have to downsize those calls. It takes an hour on average today for a routine call for service to be handled. An emergency call, we're still there on average in less than 7 minutes. An urgent call, we're there in around 20 minutes. When we reduce this number of personnel, though, those numbers, unless we shave off work, unless we stop doing things or do things differently, those numbers will explode. And so we are addressing this today. We are working across all our organizational units to reorganize us. I will and am committed to maintaining field patrol staffing levels. We have to do that. That's our most visible form of government, and our most visible form of policing is a man and woman in a black and white. Field investigations, investigative work by detectives on violent crimes and serious property crimes will be supported, as will be community engagement such as our senior leads, our community safety partnership program, and others that engage in demonstrating that this badge is not just some tool of oppression and suppression, that we work in support and in service to all of our communities. So there's many challenges ahead, but let me say that I am proud of the work of the men and women of this organization. They've not got into a pity party. They're beat up. They're depressed. There's a lot of anti-police sentiment that's out there, and there's a lot of people who've lost their way in the sense of remembering the reforms and how we lead American policing on so many different levels. But I haven't forgotten them, and I haven't forgotten the work, and I'm proud of the work they do. And I'm committed to ensuring that we navigate this difficult period of time in a manner that sees to the safety of the city and the success of the city as we move forward. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. That's a brief primer. As you know, second largest city in America. There's a lot of complexity when we talk about public safety, and there's very many aspects, and I've just touched on a few. But I wanted to take this opportunity to put some framework up there of where we were, the period we've gone through just now, and what the stage is for the future. And I believe that I think we are equipped to get through this and to be a stronger and a better and a more responsive department to the core function of why policing exists in this city, to the safety of all of our communities. Thank you all.
Thank you. We have questions. Matt, if you could unmute yourself, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions there.
I do have a lot of questions. Thank you, Michael, for your comments, and thank you for the work that you do. First of all, I want to let everybody know that the questions that are coming in, I guarantee you I will not have time to ask them. It's not that they're the best questions, but at some point, Richard is going to give me the hook, and I'm going to have to stop asking questions. So I'm going to get to as many questions as I can, and if I don't ask your question, it's not that it's the best question. It's just that I got the hook. Also, there's a handful of questions that are put out by through Anonymous. And Anonymous, it's always been our policy that we'll ask the folks that are asking questions that we can address, because we are asking the people to actually ask the questions themselves. So with that said, if we have time, I'll get to some of the anonymous questions and I'll ask those. So the first person that we have is actually from our board member, Jay Weitzler. So if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Chief, I'd like to, of course, thank you very much for the efforts in dealing with a very difficult job at certainly a very trying time in history, and also taking the time out of your life to appear with us tonight to try and talk to us, make us understand what you're going through, and we can ask you questions. Real quickly, there was an article in Los Angeles Times this morning, which you may have seen, going back to the scrutiny, the closer scrutiny that many people are putting the LAPD under. As you said, you have to deal with a lot of anti-police sentiment now that you didn't have to deal with before. I read an article in the Times this morning that said there are approximately 1,750 complaints of police bias over the last 3 years. And not one of those complaints was sustained by the department. So I have two questions relative to that. I'll ask this kind of the second one first. Second one is, how are we to believe that out of 1,750 complaints, not even one of them has any justification? And number two, what exactly is a complaint that is filed under police bias as opposed to excessive use of force or something else?
So the term is bias policing, and it's an allegation that a person believes that they were stopped or some action was taken against them by a police officer because of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, some type of prejudice, of bias in a sense of discrimination. And so we take those complaints as a matter that any allegation, whether it's during a traffic stop or any encounter with a police officer, we will take a formal investigative complaint, and we will investigate and interview the officer. We'll interview the complainant. We'll look at the facts and circumstances of the engagement, the encounter. We'll review any video evidence, including body-worn video, and the facts and circumstances of if this was a traffic stop. What does the digital in-car video show as far as the officer's actions leading up to? The person believes that they were stopped. They make an allegation. The only reason you stopped me was because I'm an African-American male. And we'll then look back and see what was the facts and circumstances of that stop. In many instances, the benefit of the body-worn video today is that we can demonstrate in concert with the digital in-car video that the officers saw the vehicle with tinted windows, or saw a vehicle without license or registration, or commit a traffic violation, and the officers initiated a traffic stop. And that the point of even identifying the individual as a male or female or by their race was unknown to the officer until they approached the vehicle. That doesn't remove the perception or the belief by the person in the vehicle that they were stopped because they were black, that they were stopped because they were black and they're driving down Dickens from Van Nuys, and that the officer only stopped them because of them not, quote unquote, in their view, in their mind, fitting the area. We have a history in law enforcement of prejudice. There's not a question in my mind that those perceptions are built from the history of law enforcement across America that enforced the laws that involve discrimination. And our history is short in regards to just, a few days ago was the 100-year anniversary of women having the right to vote. And so this isn't just an issue of race, it's an issue of gender equality. And policing has been used to suppress and impact those communities. And that is an outgrowth that I believe results in many of these allegations. Our efforts in each instance is to determine whether or not there's a preponderance of evidence to support that the officer's actions were based on the race of the individual as alleged. Now, a couple points there. That is, first of all, difficult to do if the actions demonstrated in video is that there was a traffic violation and that the officer doesn't express that I'm choosing to take action this time because of that person's race, or they utter something. This is not unique to LA. This occurs across American policing. The Times article today was a bit biased in that it supported that we haven't sustained or proven that any of those bias complaints. And by the way, we have about 1.7 million encounters a year. So over a 3-year period, that number would be close to 5 million contacts. And over the course of 5 million contacts, 1,700 instances of allegations of misconduct in the sense of a biased policing. And while we haven't sustained any of them, we also haven't been able to prove that none of it existed. A number of those have been not resolved, meaning we couldn't prove that it happened, we couldn't prove that it didn't happen. And what we really believe is part of our solution is our ability to sit down with complainants and talk about when they have those beliefs, is officers to sit down with those who make those accusations, and we mediate and we go through the perception on both parties. So this is a path going forward. Is we also have each investigation is subject to review by our Office of Inspector General, which does not work for me. They work for the Board of Police Commissioners. And if our investigation falls short, if we're ignoring evidence or we misjudge and classify this, then it should be sustained. There has not been one time in my tenure as chief where that has occurred. We will protect the rights of the officer to due process. We're not going to, for sake of a stat or number, sustain a count or an allegation of racial bias or prejudice to satisfy someone's desire that they believe with this many numbers of complaints that there must be something there. The smoke, the concept of where there's smoke, there must be fire, and I think that everyone deserves the same concept that as we treat individuals of color on their basis of their individuality and not on the basis of their color, policing deserves the same benefit.
Michael, thank you for the answer. Can you have a little bit shorter answer those, just so that we can get more questions in? I know it's hard.
Come on, Matt. That's not fair to me.
All right, the next question.
That's just a little question. I mean, just.
I know.
Thank you, Chief.
The next question is from Edward Corbell. Edward, are you unmuted?
I am here.
Okay, you want to ask your question?
Yes, I do.
Actually, Edward, if you can paraphrase it, because you've got, just if you can get to the meat of it, that would be better.
So I'm wondering if it might make sense for the LAPD to reallocate some of its activities so that you had a different group of personnel issuing traffic citations and leave the police to handle the more serious criminal and other issues that are facing us daily, constantly on every street in Los Angeles. And I understand that they're trying to, they often catch criminals when they pull someone over for citation, but it seems their time would be much better spent on real criminal activity that is going on constantly.
Well, traffic safety in Los Angeles is an important matter. Vision Zero, an idea that through traffic design, education, engineering, and enforcement, to get a motoring public to respect the rules of the road, and it saves lives, and enforcement plays a role in that. The question I do believe that, and I look forward to shifting the investigation of low-level traffic collisions, which simply do little more than form an insurance report, to shift that away from LAPD. I believe that civilian members of the Department of Transportation, for instance, could respond to scenes involving low-level, complained of injuries, minor injury traffic collisions, where there's no criminal culpability, there's not someone driving under the influence or committing a crime of like a hit and run involving an injury, that those can be investigated by civilians. That's about 60 to 70,000 investigations a year. And those investigations take 2 to 3 hours. And so I look forward to shifting that. Now on traffic enforcement, the challenge with this is what the law provides for, and then also the realities. We had an officer that was shot during a traffic collision or traffic stop just a year and a half ago in the Mission area of the San Fernando Valley. The dangers from traffic stops to the officers, whether it be a traffic officer or motor officer or police officer, are real. There was Paul Vernon, an ex-partner of mine, was killed in the San Fernando Valley as a motor cop, stopping a person, 4 individuals that were in a vehicle that ran a stop sign. So while we conduct hundreds of thousands of traffic stops and may or may not result in an enforcement of a citation, that is work that from a safety standpoint, I'm not sure that unarmed non-police personnel would be willing to go into. We do see DOT now, they take enforcement action relative to parkers, people who are unlawfully parking their vehicle. But doing that in moving vehicles, it's been suggested that they would arrest DUI drivers. More than 700 people last year were injured or killed in the city of Los Angeles by DUI drivers. I don't know if a DUI driver will stop behind somebody who's flashing yellow lights at them. And when they're flashing those yellow lights, if they were to stop, if they would get out and would conform and would submit to an arrest by a civilian. So these are matters of expectations that I think that we need to talk about and we need to explore. But I look forward to shifting resources, particularly in the traffic collision investigation world, outside of policing. But traffic enforcement, I think the parking citations where those are at, I think is in the right spot. And I look forward to expanding that, because even today we're called upon to do traffic control because of a shortage of DOT officers.
Okay, thank you. The next person up is Sean Kurzweil, I believe. This and this question that Sean's going to ask, we had quite a few questions also emailed into us, as well as sent in as questions. Sean, are you there? Are you unmuted?
Yeah, I am. Hi, Chief Moore. So Officer Berry was always very good about trying to establish contact with homeless that were in areas they shouldn't be, on the LA River and such, to encourage them to move on. I will agree with you that cleaning is certainly not the job of the police, and it should be handled by other entities. But I mean, I guess this is an open question for everyone. Whose job is it to ensure that our communities are not overrun with filth and mentally ill individuals who could pose a danger potentially, could start fires when it starts getting colder. You know, I have contacted the council member's office, and, you know, Brad's been really good about, you know, trying to respond in the way that he can. And there are laws that hamper their ability to get terribly involved. But it seems that through no fault of any agencies, everyone is punting. You know, maybe the police aren't the best for this, and so we punt to outreach individuals, or we punt to the council member's office, or we punt to Caltrans, and Caltrans is too understaffed to handle it. And just looking around the city, I've lived here, you know, for 20 years, and there's clearly a failing. You know, maybe some of this is the economy, you know, forces outside of our control, but, you know, from West Hollywood, you know, to Studio City to Sherman Oaks, it's clear.
Well, let me say that just in short order here. The police department has become the 911, the emergency room for every social problem. Think about that. At 3 o'clock in the morning, if you have a mental health episode, is there a mental health professional working anywhere in the city of Los Angeles? Yeah, it's 911. And who do we transfer that call to? We give that to a unit, such as one of the officers in Van Nuys, a couple officers to roll out there. We try to give them added training. We try to give them added tools to de-escalate and to deal with that mental health episode, because we don't have mental health professionals working. So the crisis that we have right now is America, and as a community, we have allowed social service disciplines to work between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday, with holidays off. We've got to change that. And so this insistence that we stop and we move these things away from law enforcement, I welcome. We staffed at the height of our shelter program for persons who are houseless. LAPD staffed 26 shelters 24 hours a day with officers, because we could not get others, civilians, to take on that responsibility of simply providing security. And so this has got to change. And what has happened by the council and the mayor's office, Mayor Garcetti, is he said, we hear you. We're going to shift resources away from policing, $150 million, and we're going to invest in these other services. And so the department is not going to get in the way of that. Our work is to identify that these are functions that others should do. And now I think it's time to identify those personnel and to get them out there. There's no reason in the world why a police officer has to have someone move along out of the Sepulveda Dam Basin, except for one. There's no one else that'll go out there. And that's got to change.
Okay. The next question is from Amalia Schick.
Hi, Chief Moore. Thank you. Thank you for everything you guys do. I have a very small, minor question. Petty theft, bike theft, theft of lights from front yards. You know, it's happened to us and we've not reported it because we just thought, what's the point? Are you really gonna find our bike? Are you gonna find who's taken the lights from our front yard? And I mean, should I be reporting it, or what's the, I mean, everyone has cameras, it seems, apart from us, that everyone else seems to have, I just would like your input on those things.
Those type of thefts, those low-level matters, you're right. In today, California, the communities of California have spoken very loud at the ballot box and in the election boxes, both for criminal sanctions as well as for officials that have stepped into matters of criminal justice reform, and we're not enforcing our way out of those situations. We're reaching and we're saying that we can do better. There are, you know, the COVID pandemic has resulted in more than 5,000 individuals being downsized out of the county jails because of the risk of that pandemic to their health and welfare versus the risk that they pose by the low level or crimes that they've committed that they're being held otherwise for. The no bail provision that's out there says that these are offenses that, while they're low level, they're just stealing, they're petty, they're not major or significant matters, and the public doesn't want them out of the community setting. We need to support them with housing, with jobs, and with treatment so that they can rehabilitate and they can become more productive. So the police department is, we are an agent in this regard, and we arrest people, but the prosecution or the holding of them is a matter beyond our control. I will say, for instance, with we see this now right now with house parties, is that house parties are not unique. They're not new to Los Angeles, certainly not new to Sherman Oaks, where you have neighbors that have become unruly, that have have basically become rude in regards to their exercising civility, and they've held these parties. Now with the pandemic and the closing of clubs and markets or clubs and restaurants, there's some who've now capitalized on this with influencers on TikTok and others that have become commercial engagements, and they have these large house parties, which are endangering people's health. Make no mistake about it. These are vectors of huge increases of risks of this pandemic. And it was interesting that what was the first thing that happened was I got calls to say, Chief, what are you going to do to stop that? And we've got to make these arrests. We've got to pull these people out of here. And it's like, well, where do I put them? Well, you're going to put them in jail. But no, we're putting those people in jail. We're putting those people out of jail. So what if I just accomplish by arresting them and putting them in jail that they can't stay in jail, so they're back out in the street? In fact, most, as the city attorney will say, neighbor prosecutors on here, and forgive me, I did not catch your name, but we'll tell you that these are ACE, these are administrative citations. Now, given this pandemic, we have been given a set of authorities. The mayor is authorized for utility shutoffs upon the chronic and repeat offenders. And the department, while will not decide which houses lose utilities, we are cooperating and are providing the mayor's office with locations that are chronic locations. People who are blatantly disregarding these rules, we are providing that information. We're not going to obstruct that or drag our feet on that, because these are risks to public safety. But the whole mechanism there, I just want to draw your attention, and I want to draw out Los Angeles. And I think the LA Times, which this is not an occasion that occurs a lot, but their editorial today on the left-hand column was spot on. As we look to move things away from policing, there's legitimate things that should not belong on our plate, but our habit is constantly to give it to police or fire. But I do believe we need to be thoughtful, take some things away, but also recognize, to your point, that there are core matters of safety and security in neighborhoods that the police are an appropriate resource. Lastly, we can never be a police department, in my view, for the safety of Los Angeles and the trust in policing that solely only deals with the most violent offenders and the most serious crimes. Because if you allow a permissiveness like that, then you lose a level of social control. I'm not saying as a society we have to be strict and overly an ogre, 3 strikes and you're out. But we also need to change that the face of policing is not a military face. It's not a punisher. It's not just an enforcer. It is someone that you can rely upon as a problem solver, as a partner in the shared responsibility of public safety. So the downsizing or the right sizing of the organization, I believe at this point, is a matter of shedding work from us and getting other agencies and disciplines and organizations to step up and do that and do those responsibilities.
Thank you. The next question comes from, and you actually, I had a few questions on the house parties, so you answered that with, you got a 2-for-1 on that one. Thank you. So the next question is from Melissa Zacharias, I believe your last name is. I'm not very good at, Melissa, you there? Melissa, you should be unmuted, so.
Hello.
There you go.
Hi. How's it going? I'm so sorry. Hello, we are from the Valley of Change here in Sherman Oaks. And we do have a group of people together here that we are working towards change. And we are trying to help our community and also bring petitions. We also are encouraging our community to please actively stay put with our Black Lives Matter groups to bring awareness of some of the issues that are going on in our neighborhoods. But what I have a question is, how do you guys feel about us being here in the corner? Truthfully, how does the LAPD feel about us being here in the corner in a public place, protesting peacefully, how does the LAPD feel about staying connected with us in a way that we can also, just in case we ever have somebody that is a violent person trying to approach us and threaten us, how is it that you guys feel about working with us as a community? That's not going to happen. As a community group, and that is trying to bring change to our community. We're not calling them.
We fully support. Our effort is to facilitate First Amendment expressions. We are the initial function of finding individuals or understanding individuals who are protesting is to reach out to the organizer, to the person who's going to be a representative, if you will, and understand how can we help you? How can we safeguard your safety? How can we ensure that others are respected? And what that means is if you're on a sidewalk on a corner of X and Y Street, is that we encourage you to be mindful of traffic and to be mindful that people may or may not see you or may be distracted by you. But you have every right to be there, and we're going to support you. And if counter protesters arrive, we're going to keep we'll reach out to them, understand their position. It may be 180 degrees from yours, and we're going to make an effort to say, okay, we need both of you. We're going to allow both of these expressions to go on, not allow, but facilitate. And encourage you just to remain mindful of what the laws are and the limits. You choose to then go into the street. Well, we're going to talk with you about there's some level of allowance, if you will, supporting that expression. We're not going to we typically will not make an immediate arrest unless you go onto the freeway, because frankly, there you're going to kill people. It could be yourself, and that's a dangerous situation that we cannot tolerate. The reactions of speed and the traffic flows we have seen across this country where people have died as a result of freeway incursions. But roadways, we're going to ask that you not do it, but if you choose to, then we'll make every effort to reach out to you, understand, and if you wish to remain, then we'll transition this into, well, then the consequence of that could be your arrest. And then we'll work with you that if you fail to disperse because you're blocking and you're unwilling to leave the street, then depending on the circumstances, we may advise you, then we're going to order you to disperse an unlawful assembly and you're subject to arrest. And how would you like us to do that? We're going to take this a step by step at a time, as long as there's not violence, as long as there's not property damage and others being attacked. When those things happen, then we are going to escalate and take greater control and exercise and take action to stop that action, to stop you or individuals within your group. And to do within the best of our ability, and to do so in a manner that de-escalates and uses the least amount of authority, if you will, and certainly we try to avoid the use of force. But there are instances in which force is used against officers, attacks against officers, attacks against others, and which we will employ force proportional to the threats and the risks that our people are placed in. And so this is an area that I'm proud of Los Angeles as we look across the country today, that we have protests every single day in Los Angeles. Tonight, as I left downtown, there were protests in the downtown corridor, and these protests were being facilitated, roads were being blocked, traffic was being, if you will, impacted. But this has been a city, particularly in the commercial corridors, that has facilitated that as a right of American expression, of us democracy. And as a police department, we work feverishly to protect that.
Thank you. The next question is from Mike Benedito. Mike, you there?
Yes, just got on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I was just curious if you had looked at the way Simi Valley is doing their work on homelessness. They basically have a department dedicated strictly for homeless. They have a liaison. Sergeant Shorts was the liaison. Mm-hmm. And the whole department has a bit of a more feel and sensitivity to homeless people in the street, knowing what resources they might need. They work very closely with the Samaritan Center. They go out with social workers because, after all, police officers are not social workers and they shouldn't try to be. But that was a definite alternative to a possibility in taking control of that.
Believe me, I'm fully supportive. We as a department fully support the existence and actually the responsibilities of LAHSA, the Los Angeles Housing Service Authority. It's a county city agency. It is given substantial resources. It has workers as well as community-based organizations that are throughout Los Angeles and are charged with providing services and providing immediate housing, transitional housing, supportive housing for persons who are houseless. And we welcome and need the expansion of those resources across the calendar and across all times of day. We have non-budgeted, we have allocated personnel that would typically work in black and whites and handle police work as outreach and engagement with LAHSA as well as with Los Angeles Sanitation and others in this outreach and engagement with persons who are houseless. I welcome the ability, and I expect that we will be downsizing just because of the very observations you make. The key here is that we're going to do exactly what you're asking us to do. This is not unique to Simi Valley or other parts. They have other departments, and we support the fact that those departments, either if they don't exist, that they be created, but in Los Angeles, they exist. They just need to be deepened and more resources given to them. And they need to work those resources across the 24-hour clock. And it's no longer a matter that we can pick up the slack. We will not have the resources. We have more than 50 personnel that are assigned to our homeless outreach engagement process, also known as our HOPE teams. I can't see how we can continue to do that engagement with the hundreds of officers that we're losing. So these are just resources that in the last 5 to 10 years that we have brought to bear because of this crisis of our generation as an effort to support resources that are not there and not in place. Those resources need to step up and they need to be fortified so that they can take on these responsibilities. Believe me, Los Angeles police officers we welcome that capability.
Okay, thank you. The next question is coming from Diego. But before Diego asks his question, I just wanted to ask you a question myself. I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, but with the whole defunding movement and with the budget already being cut for your department, are there 3 areas that you can look at? You know, again, I know dealing with the homeless and dealing with the mental, but are there what would be the 3 top areas if you could outsource or say, please take this off our shoulders?
Today it's going to be traffic collisions. It's going to be homeless outreach and engagement, mental health services, dealing with people who are having crisis or in crisis, minor disputes that because of emotional issues. Those are outreach and engagements that other social programming exists and non-law enforcement can be very effective in. And I look forward to us shedding that. The other thing is that there's a lot of criminal justice reform that has resulted in a lot of police activity that does not result in criminal prosecutions. And what I mean by that is you look at identity theft and forgeries and financial crimes that have instances in which we have a high volume of reports, but prosecutions are not frequent or often. And I'm looking to shift those investigations away from intensive in-person matters to either online reporting or other ways of enacting those reports. During the last 5 months since this pandemic, we take a lot more reports now online rather than dispatching officers to the scene and sitting down with you and taking a written report.
Okay.
We've saved tens of thousands of hours, and I look forward to fortifying that. Last issue, Matt, is we've shut down desk operations except for significant matters, and that is saving us resources so that we're not staffing desks 24 hours a day in 21 different locations. I think this pandemic has brought an opportunity for us to downsize some of these counter services that we, much as banking, can no longer continue to invest in.
Okay. Diego, do you want to ask your question?
Diego's not available, Matt.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, that was Richard said I had the one more question. Is Uday Sakur there? And while Bob is looking at that, I also wanted to let you know that we did have quite a few folks on the line, just, giving you shout outs for what you do and what your department does as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And Bob, were you able to get that Udi up?
Yes.
Okay. Udi, you want to ask your question? No?
His mic is open.
Okay, maybe he's being shy. Okay. Well, I don't have anybody else in queue right now, so I apologize because I know I have a lot of other questions.
Okay, Matt, why don't we, I know the chief has other matters he has to attend to before he calls it a day or a night. So we will be sending the various questions to the chief so he can get an understanding of the concerns of the people that are participating in today's call. We look forward to seeing the chief in person in the near future. With that, I'd like to thank the chief. He's always been with us physically and help over the years. So we really appreciate his taking time this evening to be with us. Our next meeting is the third Wednesday in September. And I'll tease it by saying it's a elected official who has never spoken to our group before. And is a person you're going to want to hear from. With that, I thank everyone for attending. We look forward to seeing you the third Wednesday in September. Thank you very much.
Goodbye, Chief Moore.
Thank you,
Thank you, Moore. Thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you very much. It was great.